Today, we will begin our study of ancient Greece. Now, ancient Greece is located in the northeastern hemisphere. You can see that it is above the equator, so it's in the northern hemisphere, and it is the east of the prime meridian. Ancient Greece had unique geography. It was a peninsula. It had water on three sides, and it enjoyed a mild temperature because it was so close to the equator. It again had close proximity to water, and it was called the Balkan Peninsula. It also was a very mountainous country, which provided a lot of protection for the people that lived there. Now, there were some disadvantages of living in Greece. One was that it had a rugged terrain or landscape, which made farming very difficult. And it had mountains. Again, we know that it provided protection, but this also created a disadvantage in terms of travel and communication. Now, if you examine the map, you will see that Peloponnesus is in the southern part of Greece, and it connected to the mainland by a narrow strip of land. An isthmus is the narrow strip of land, and you will see it marked on the map, that is surrounded by water on both sides, and it connects two larger areas of land. Now, an archipelago is a group of islands, and you can see on the map in the southeastern corner of the map, you'll see a large group of islands. And Greece had many islands, over 2,000 islands, and you will see the largest island right below that archipelago or south of the archipelago, and it is known as Crete. Now, let's discuss the first civilizations. The first group of people we're going to look at are the Minoans, and they were the first advanced civilization of what would become ancient Greeks, and they developed on the island of Crete. The Minoans, named for King Minous, a ruler of Greek mythology, Greek mythology, were influenced by other civilizations around the Mediterranean Sea, such as the Egyptians that we've already learned about. Much of now what is known about these people is based on the findings of Sir Arthur Evans, an archaeologist who discovered the remains of the Minoan palace Knossos in 1898. We know the Minoans as a lively and active people who enjoyed life. They were fond of animals, dancing, and sports, and one of the most interesting pastimes of the Minoans were the bull leaping, an event in which boys and girls would grab a bull by the horns and flip over on its back. The Minoans also built beautiful gardens and were quite skilled at jewelry making. Now let's look at the Mycenaeans. Many scholars consider the Mycenaeans to be the first true Greeks. This group of people moved into Europe from Central Asia and eventually made their way south to the Balkan Peninsula, where they settled in southern Greece. Their name comes from the most important city, Mycenae. Much of what we know about them comes from the 1870 findings of a treasure hunter and archaeologist who found the ancient city. Now, unlike the peace-loving, lively, and happy-go-lucky Minoans, the Mycenaeans were a warlike people. They built their cities with armed fortresses on hillsides, all connected together by huge stone walls. Their art is mostly of battle scenes, and particularly the Trojan Wars. Now, around 1250 BC, the Mycenaeans launched an attack against Troy, a city in Asia Minor to the east. Scholars are not sure why they attacked Troy, but it is likely that the city's location between the Aegean and Black Seas made it a target. The Mycenaeans spent 10 years attacking Troy until, according to the famous story, they presented the Trojans with a giant wooden statue of a horse snuck into the city in its belly, and as the story goes, once the Once inside the city gate, the Mycenaeans jumped from the horse and slaughtered the Trojans in the middle of the night. Now, the next group of people are the Dorians, and there are many theories about the origins of the Dorians. And according to Greek mythology, their name comes from the city in central Greece called Doris. What is known of the Dorians is that they invaded the mainland around 1100 BC, and although they were not as advanced as many as the Mycenaeans, they did have one important advantage: the iron slashing sword, which was much stronger than bronze swords used by the Mycenaeans. Not only were the Dorians' weapons superior, but their warriors arrived in the area at the time when the Mycenaean civilization was already in decline, making them an easy target. The Dorian invasion led to the period of violence and lawlessness known as the Dark Ages. Although few, if any, written records exist of this period, it is believed that most crops were destroyed and trade became to a halt during this period. Now let's examine a city-state, and you will see in the picture of Athens a Greek city-state. Well, a city-state is an independent area organized around and including a city, and it's called a polis in Greek. Most city-states had similar layouts and elements such as the Acropolis, which is the fortified hill, and an agora, which is a market place and public meeting place. You can see a picture of the Acropolis there, which is an elevated raised fortress built at the center of the Greek city. And you can see the agora, which was a marketplace near the center of a Greek city-state. It served as an important gathering place and similar today to our town square. Now, Athens is one of the most famous city-states, and it is a city-state that was found in Greece, really kind of the southeastern part of Greece, and they focused on developing the mind. Another famous city-state was Sparta, and they focused on developing the body, and they wanted to have a strong army. So very much a military city-state. Now, we know that there was a lack of farmland in this area, so they established colonies which enabled them to use their time, effort, and land to grow and produce tradable items. They grew grapes, olives, and produced wine. This leads to Greece becoming the leading commercial sea power of the ancient world. And remember, it is a peninsula, so there's water on 3 sides. Now, Greek citizenship. This applied to all men ages 18 and older. They were born in Greece and completed their military service. They had an active participation in government affairs and was not something they took lightly. All were supposed to attend and vote in the assembly, and officers and leaders were chosen by lottery or were elected by the assembly. Now, Greece does gain confidence as they're getting their city-states together, and after beating the Persians, the Greeks gained control of the Aegean region. The Greeks removed the Persian threat from the area and entered what they called the Golden Age. Now, Pericles was one of the most famous leaders in Athenian history. He wanted people to be proud of their city, and he emphasized the greatness of the Athenian democracy. He worked very hard to make it a beautiful city and hired artists to decorate his monuments. Democracy. This was a form of government by the ancient Greeks in which the power was controlled by the people. Now, again, it is to be basically the citizens, and you had to be a male to take part in that. This golden age that I referred to was a time of numerous achievements for the Greeks. These achievements were in literature, science, philosophy, and these achievements left a lasting impression on Europe and the world. Some of their inventions were hydraulics in the science field, in medicine, scientific rather than religious, and in math, the Pythagorean theorem. Now, Greek literature, they also made advances in Greek literature. Poems were used to teach Greek values. Plays were used to poke fun at government and other issues. Fables and myths taught morality. There's a picture of a tragedy, which is a play on a serious topic such as death or suffering, and a comedy would be a light-hearted or amusing play with a happy ending. Now, mythology, we know, was their religion of the Greeks, and it helped them explain their world and natural phenomena. And you can see at the right, Zeus being the head of the god and the different gods and goddesses. We know they were polytheistic, and they believed and worshipped in many gods: Zeus, Poseidon, Hera, Athena. Now, the Greek Olympics, again, the Greek Olympics were thought to have begun around as early as 1200 BC, but records were not kept until 776 or 776 BC. From these records, modern-day historians have learned much about the ancient games. They were held every 4 years in the city of Olympia, and at first they only lasted 2 days, mainly because there was only one event, the foot race. Over time, more events were added, such as boxing, disc throwing, horseback riding, chariot racing, wrestling, and the pentathlon. Athletes traveled from as far away as southern Spain and the east coast of the Black Sea, as well as from all the Greek city-states to showcase their talents. People also came from all over to watch the games, filling the stands with tens of thousands of cheering fans. The Olympics were actually religious in nature and held to honor Zeus, the king of the Greek gods. In fact, the Olympics were more like a religious festival. Ceremonies were held and sacrifices were made to the gods. The Greeks believed that athletes received their talents from the gods, so they prayed for victory and thanked them for their success. The winners of each event received nothing more than the wreaths of olive branches. However, some cities honored their Olympic heroes with statues in their honors or by paying poets to write verses about them. A simple wreath and the honor of victory was enough for the athletes at first, but as Greek societies began to decline, athletes demanded bigger rewards and became more interested in money and not honor. Eventually, bribery became common, and by the end, the ancient games became more like a circus than a festival, losing its religious and sacred atmosphere. Now, we can also look at some of the advantages that, or the advancements made in the columns and how they decorated with architecture. This picture is the Capitol, which is the top of an architectural column. There were 3 types of columns, the most recognizable feature of the Greek architecture, which was a straight pillar used to support the weight of a building and create a grand entrance. So you will see the first column is a Doric column, then an Ionic column, and a Corinthian column. The next thing we will look at is a fable. It is a story that taught a lesson, usually using animals to talk and act human. We know that there were 3 great philosophers in Greek history. Socrates was the world's first philosopher. He was a thinker and seeker of truth and reasons who studied ideas and ethics. Plato and Aristotle were students of Socrates, and he taught his students to discover the truth by asking questions. And this Socratic method is his way of questioning his students and is still used in education today. So there's a picture of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Now, the Peloponnesian Wars led to the depopulation, destruction, and loss of leadership, unemployment, and weakened polis. Then the Macedonians, under Philip II, conquered and took over the region. It was Alexander the Great, Philip's son, who admired the Greeks, and he spread Greek culture and ideas throughout his huge empire, preserving it for the future. It is this where we get the term Hellenistic, which is Greek-like, and it was Hellenistic culture helped shape the life in Egypt, Central Asia, and other parts of the world.